Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you listening to this Hit It and Quit It by Focus Consulting Group from all over the world. Brian and I are excited to bring you this topic today because it's really about what we're all entering into. But I wanted to go back for a moment and talk about a phrase that was used literally about 2 years ago, which was the new normal. Is this the new normal we're entering into? That was a very common phrase, and it was a phrase about change and our reaction to what was changing in our world of work and how we were going to respond to that. So today is a lot about change. And the key is, how do we respond to change? Because here's what we know. We know that resistance is futile. We'll talk about that. And we also want to give you some counterintuitive strategies as leaders and managers to think about as we go into the new world of work. And for many of you, this is an experiment. You don't know if you're going to be back 2 days, 3 days, 1 day, none days, 5 days. Our experience from talking to our clients all over the world is it's kind of a hodgepodge. There's a lot of different things going on here. So we want to be paying attention to the fact that change is here to stay. Change, by the way, is the new normal. And so the first thing that we would advise you to think about in terms of change is resistance is futile. So if you think about how you react to change, and we all react to change differently. Some of us embrace change and we lean into it. Others, on the other hand, say, no, I don't like change. I'd rather not have any change. I like my patterns of behavior. So it's a lot like these Chinese handcuffs. And you might remember this little game you got when you were a kid at a birthday party, right? You put your fingers in the end, and the more you pull against the handcuff, the more stuck you get. And that's a lot like change. The more I work against change, the more stuck I get. And I'm not able to actively manage change the way I would like to, especially as a leader or a manager of people. So what do we do? How do we recognize that resistance is futile, change is the new normal, and where do we go from here? Well, many of you are getting back into whatever the next thing looks like, and you're also encountering a few other things like a changing workforce. Many of you may recall, if you listened to this years and years ago, that Jim Ware and I predicted back in 2016, based on data, obviously demographic data, that the millennial generation and now Generation Z will be 50% of the workforce. And guess what? They are. So not only have we learned new habits over the last couple of years, but we also have new expectations for what the world of work really should be looking like. So we're here to help. We want to give you some thoughts and some things to think about. And the first piece of advice we would give you, don't resist change, but run to the roar. All right, Keith, what does that mean? Well, it's a little bit of a story I learned years ago about how we deal with intuition. So here's the story. The way a pride of lions hunts is that they never let the old female lions not work for their supper. So what do we mean by that? Well, the older a lion gets, obviously, the less agile it gets, and it loses its speed, but it doesn't lose its utility. So the job of the old lion is to go behind the gazelles and to roar like crazy. She may not be able to run very fast, but she certainly can roar like crazy. The gazelles go by instinct. They run away from the roar. And what happens? They run right into the waiting pride of lions. If they worked against instinct, if they worked against their intuition, their gut, and they ran to the roar, they would actually be safe and they wouldn't be lunch or dinner. So recognizing this as a leader, what's the lesson? Run to the roar. Run toward that which you fear, change. Run toward the new, whatever the new looks like, and don't resist it, but work to build it. So here are 5 things that Brian and I are going to share with you about how do we actually work to build it. So the first thing you want to be thinking about is improve your emotional intelligence. We call it EQ. You have an IQ, right? Your intelligence quotient, and your EQ, your emotional intelligence quotient. And we recognize that IQ may be fixed, but EQ is not. And you've heard us talk about EQ a lot. The reason we've been talking about it a lot over the past 2 years is it's so important to run to the roar and recognizing that in its very simplest terms, EQ is about 3 things. Myself. How well do I know myself? How well do I know my predispositions? How well do I actually work under pressure and under stress? How well do I manage change? How well do I deal with change? How do I communicate? So know yourself really well. Others, know others and how they react to change. Here's the thing. Often, as we move into this hybrid environment, whatever it happens to look like for you, is we recognize that there are other situations that are affecting other people. For example, some people are still fearful of getting on public transportation, right? I happened to ride the train downtown Chicago yesterday, and it was an interesting experience. And I thought to myself, I wonder how all these others, some who do it daily and some who haven't done it in years, like me, feel about getting on public transportation. That's the situation we have to pay attention to. So not only the situation of public transportation, but all these situations around how do we have meetings? How do we have meetings where we have some people in the office and some people out of the office? And how do people feel about that? Are they more engaged? Are they less engaged, et cetera? So we really want to be focusing on how do I react? How do I expect others to react? And how are they reacting? Should we be operating with more empathy, for example, about people's situations? So improving your emotional intelligence, and we have a lot of ways to do that, which we will be happy to share with you if you check us out on the website or get in touch with us. But improving your emotional intelligence is the number one way to run to the roar. Because guess what? We're not going back to the old ways of doing things because too many things have changed. So there's another piece to this, which is what are you measuring and what do we call success? We know that over the past 2 years, we've gotten into new habits. And statistics tell us that, by the way, we've been as productive, if not more productive, now that we've learned some new habits and we've learned how to adapt to what was once called 2 years ago the new normal, which now has become sort of the way we do things. And we're going to change that yet again. So Brian, tell us a little bit about what should we be thinking about as managers and leaders rather than looking at time spent at a desk?
Absolutely. So focusing more on results than activity. So I've worked from home for quite some time. And when I first started working from home, I used to get a lot of jokes from my friends. Hey, what's it like being in your pajamas and your slippers all day? And while funny at first, what I really realized is, you know what? I actually get a lot more done. And I was lucky to work with a couple of firms who really were focused more on the results I generated, the outputs, the outcomes that I worked so hard at, rather than the activity, rather than checking a box, rather than seeing me. They weren't as fussed with where I did it or how I did it, just that I did it with high quality and got it done on time. So when I joined Focus 6 years ago and learned about Jody Thompson's work with Rowe on a results-only work environment, it really resonated with me, saying, wow, this really does make sense, because I have been in an environment at that point for several years where, it didn't matter I was in an office or in my apartment or in a bedroom or where I was. It just focused more on the work I was doing, making sure my clients were happy, making sure my coworkers were happy. And that's really what we've experienced. And Microsoft did a study of 31,000 people, so pretty robust. 80% of those folks said their production was the same, if not better, during the pandemic versus being in the office. And now, Keith, you've had conversations as I have had. We've heard a lot of the same things. The firm has done better. I've done better. It's actually been more of a focus on the other side. People are working harder. So we have to have this mind shift change from keeping it, activity. Oh, you've got to be in the office. You've got to be there. We have to see you to, what's the production? What are we seeing? Because what we have displaced and really dispelled is this idea that working from home cannot be done. So it's not looking busy. It's not standing in a water cooler. It's not sitting at a desk. It's what are you doing? Are you getting it done? Is it high quality? And that really should be the focus.
So Brian, as we think about results trumping activity, what's sort of the new behavior, the new things that managers really need to be thinking about? What would be a couple tips you would give them to say, we've always measured activity, but now we've got to look at the output?
Yeah, so I think it's setting realistic goals and expectations. So what I care more about is the work that gets done and not when it gets done. So it's looking at, being very clear on schedules and timelines and the type of quality that you're expecting, and then letting your team and letting the folks working for you have the autonomy, have the skill to be able to do what they need to do when they want to be able to do it. So it's having those conversations about setting other mileposts, but not micromanaging them at all in how they're actually achieving that work.
Yeah, so that's a really important point. Micromanaging, that's something that many managers do. And what I would say is you need to step back from that. So training and development, making sure your people have the skills to get the result will be critically important for managers going forward, because you can't get the result without the skill to get the result. So focus on the inputs, focus on the skills required, and focus on the goals required, and make them stretch, but make them realistic. We don't want to set people up for failure. We actually want to set them up for success. So one other way to think about this is our next point, which is, dun, 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 you're going to hear about autonomy a lot. And interesting, right now, autonomy has been sort of couched in this idea of work-life balance or flexibility or what have you. It's way, way bigger than that. It's not just about how many days I'm in the office or how many hours I'm at my desk. Autonomy is about how I do the work. So back to results. You don't get results without autonomy, because autonomy allows me to use the skills that I have to deliver the output that needs to be delivered, but I get to do it the way I want to do it, right? So that might be locational. I might be more productive, for example, I'll use myself, based on the way my biorhythms work. I'm really productive from 6 a.m. till about noon. So you guys are getting me at the tail end of my productivity, by the way, here in Chicago. I'm going to soldier through, though, I promise. But recognizing that that's when I schedule my quiet time. That's when I schedule or try and schedule my no meeting time, because I know that if I have a project due or if I'm working on something for a client, I can really do good work, fast work, and high quality work. I can get output, recognizing that I am the master of my own schedule. So autonomy is not just about location. It's not about flexibility of when you do this and when you do that. It really is about setting yourself up for success. And as a manager, understanding when is the best time for people to do certain things. We have a number of clients, by the way, who've moved to this sort of concept of no meeting Fridays or no meeting Mondays or any combination thereof. And why have they done that? Because they want to give the people that work in their organization flexibility and autonomy to do the work the way they want to do it and remove some distractions. Well, that's a good strategy, but it's a temporary strategy, right? It's short term. So you might give me no meeting Fridays or no morning meetings for the first 3 hours. Well, what if I'm a night person? What if I really get super productive at night? That could help me, but it doesn't really help me because now I have to rearrange my schedule. So autonomy is really about making sure you're meeting people where they are. And here's what we've been able to prove. We've been able to prove over the last 2 years that autonomy matters. And yeah, it was rough for the first 6 months. I completely get it. We had trouble unplugging from work. We had trouble figuring out what the right workplace was going to be. If you recall, 2 years ago, we spent a lot of our time initially in the pandemic talking about how do you arrange your workspace in a way that creates productivity. And for some people, it was working in a closet, right? Because that's what worked for them. Close the door, turn on the light, go for it. For others, it was working at the kitchen table. For some, it was working at Starbucks. I don't care. You could work on Mars. Autonomy is really about matching your energy and your productivity with flexibility. So it's more than just flexibility. It's way bigger than that. Like this little image shares with you. It's about breaking out of convention and thinking about, I am looking at results. Tell me how you're going to get the best results. And by the way, here's a little secret. Some jobs require you to be in an office. If you're the receptionist, it's kind of hard to be the receptionist working from your desk, right, at home. You likely need to be in the office to greet clients, et cetera. So just recognize autonomy isn't just a free-for-all. Autonomy is about looking at results and then giving people the ability to manage themselves to get the best result. But you can't necessarily get to autonomy and productivity without the next piece, Brian. And what is that?
Connecting to the why. So I had an interesting conversation with a client who recently returned to the office the other day. And I said, how's it going? And she said to me, it's all right. So I asked her to elaborate. And she said, I'm missing the why. I'm in my office. Nice. but I'm doing nothing. What I'm doing is no different than what I was doing when I was at home. I'm having meetings through Zoom. I don't talk to anybody. I'm not seeing anybody. It's really no different. And actually it's harder because I have to commute. And for her, it was, and I appreciate this. There was no why. Why are you coming back? So for many firms are saying, you just have to be back. But what are the benefits? What are the benefits of being there? What am I going to gain from this? And this is something, Keith, I know you in conversations you've had, we've really heard a lot about this. It's really the why and the what. Why am I coming in and what are the benefits for me? Is it going to, is there a reason behind, hey, we have to develop our young talent. So let's come in those 2 days. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm going to be very intentional about my time in the office. I know that in those days, I'm going to focus. If that's the reason I'm coming back is to help develop talent, then I'm going to organize my day. So going back to the earlier question of really, instead of just checking the box, looking more at what the work that's being done, I'll be more intentional about the activities I have that given day. I'm going to sit down with my young talent. I'm going to help to develop them. And when I leave the office that day, I'll be like, okay, that was a productive day, as opposed to just sitting in front of my computer doing the exact same thing, probably in a less productive way than I was doing before. Is it, what are you doing as leaders, as managers to try and increase conversation? Is it, early on, there are several firms that they offered free lunch, and that was to increase the collision factor. Yeah, there was still the keeping 6 feet and managing that, but there's the interaction, helping folks to understand, yes, I remember what it's like to work with folks in the office. I remember the benefits to me of the human communication, of sitting down and having ad hoc conversations and learning about them and learning about their experience. So it's really driving this idea of the why, creating a narrative, being very clear about why you're not only just having people come back to the office, but why it's beneficial for them and for the firm.
So I want to jump on that one a little bit too, Brian, because it's so important. It absolutely is about understanding and creating a level of understanding about why we're doing certain things. Why are we having no meeting Mondays, or why are we doing this and why are we doing that? But it's also a little bit broader than that too. Remember the workforce, remember the demographics of our workforce. Purpose really does matter. So we have this quote from Tony Robbins up here, really to juxtapose the fact that it is about clarity of the team, why we exist as a team, why this job exists, why we serve the clients that we do, and how we go about doing that. So it is about the purpose of the organization, and leaders now more than ever really need to connect their team to purpose. The purpose of the organization, the purpose of the team, and then the purpose of the actions, which is what Brian was talking about. It is very intentional. And so I'm going to put a little plug in here for our YouTube channel. Check out our YouTube channel. The last vlog that we released was about intentional leadership. So to Brian's point, and he said it 3 times, so our rule of 3, be more intentional about the why. And if you want some tips on that, check out that vlog. It's short, but it's powerful. So that sort of brings us to the last point here, Brian, which is making things clear. Say a little bit about how do we make things more clear?
Absolutely. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of conversations about communications, and the conversations were, have more of them, be very clear. We're not together anymore. Be overt about what's going on, the thought process, making sure checking in with people. So that was more about volume. Well, now we're past that point. Now we've moved to the part of being clearer, helping understand. We have folks in disparate areas. How are you going to communicate with folks? Whether it be, if you're going to have a meeting, record it. Is it, if you're going to have people in office and hybrid, maybe there's a combination of recording a session and issuing some written documentation so that people are experiencing things from a very similar perspective in a very clear way. So it's not necessarily the volumes of what you're producing, but it's being, again, I'm going to use that word intentional about what you're talking about, checking in. It could be a 15-minute Zoom with a colleague that you haven't talked with in a while, getting a sense of where they are, what they're up to, and creating that connection. So it's not about keeping a tally about, we've got to meet 10 times, or I've got to get 7 pieces of communication out to folks. It's being very direct about what you want to do, why you want to do it, how you want to do it, and being clear in those communications. We thank you for joining us this morning, afternoon, evening. To hear the recording, please visit our refresh website at focuscgroup.com, found under Our Thoughts, Hit It and Quit It. Our next Hit It and Quit It will be April 22nd, where we'll be talking about diagnose before you decide and talking about organizational leadership and some of the tools we use to do so. And you'll again hear from the Focus team. And if you would like to join our distribution list, please contact Laura at lerkerly@focuscgroup.com, and she'll get you all set up to get white papers, webinars, and seminar notices. And with that, we wish you a fantastic weekend and look forward to seeing you again soon.